All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Murox ASP.NET 4.6 with C# 2015 6th edition. We're just finishing up, I believe, with Chapter 20, which is on how to authenticate and authorize users. And I'm up to page 748. We're talking about user customization. When you run an application that uses the web forms template, you can immediately start registering users, and the application will remember those users so they can log in and out. And that's because a lot of stuff is going on behind the scenes. You can look at the tables in the authentication database that's displayed by Code First. To do that, you choose View Server, Server Explorer to display the Server Explorer. Then you can expand the data connections, default connection, and tables to see a list of users under the show table data. All right. If you want to be able to customize a database with Code First, you use what's called the PMC, or Package Manage Console, to create and run migration tables. These tables, or these mitigation files. These mitigation files contain C# code that do things like add and drop database tables and columns. You can see some of it in there on the slide. This figure shows a procedure for adding a custom birth date property. The first step is to register a user. Then, when you enable migration, as described in step 2, an initial create migration file that contains the code for creating an authentication database is created. Third, you add a new property to the application user class in the identity models.cs file of the models directory. Fourth, you create a C# migration file by running the add migration command. And fifth, you update the database by running the update database command. These steps are all shown in the middle of page 749. Again, you can use Code First migrations to customize this authentication database via the package manager. Now, the author mentions here that if you want more information, you should go out to the MSDN documentation at msdn.microsoft.com, which is the Microsoft Developer Network. Once you complete this 5-step procedure, you can use the new property in code like you would anything else. So on 749, they have this enable migrations, which creates the migrations folder and a configurations.cs file. Add migration name, which adds a migration file with a name you've given. And update database, which again runs the migration files and updates the database schema accordingly. So these were the steps that were shown on the middle of page 749. Run the app, register at least one user, although that step is optional. Open the PMC, type enable migrations at the command prompt. No, it's a console, so you're going to be going from a command prompt. Press enter. You do this once per application. Open the identity models.cs file in the models directory. Find the code for the application user class. Add your new field. Go back to the package manager console. Type add migration with the new field name. Press enter. And while still at the PMC, type update database, which should do the migration for you then. And the property should then be added. So a migration file that's generated by the package managed controller or console contains a class that has the same name as the file minus the timestamp. You can see an example of this on the screen here and shown on page 751 in the text. As mentioned on the bottom of the page here, this type of migration file contains up and down methods. The up method is called when a migration file is run by the update database command. The down is called when the -target migration switch is included on this command to roll a database back to an earlier migration. Finally, on 752 and 753, as the author mentions here, the seed method of the configuration class in the migration directory is called every time update database is run. This is a good place to add test data or add initial data like an admin user. And an example of this is shown in the book here and also, with a code here on page 753. So, we finished another chapter, and this chapter was designed to give you some thoughts on authentication and authorization. We learned how to use the web forms template to create a web application that provides for basic user authentication, how to modify an app so it provides for roles, and how to define the roles and access rules for the application, how to use the seed method, although I really didn't go over that at all, how to distinguish between authentication and authorization. We talked about individual user authentication. We talked a little bit about the login view and login status. And then we went in and described or talked about the process of registering a user, logging that user in, being allowed to change their password, etc. While we did this, we also talked about some of the roles, users, and access rules that are used for authentication and authorization. We explained a little bit. You saw how that one setting was set up there for MARS, the multiple active results set. So you saw how to enable it. Finally, as mentioned here, the last thing we did was we looked briefly at how to use code-first migrations to add custom user data to the authentication database. Now that's it for Chapter 20. When I return in just a couple moments, we will be going over Chapter 21, which starts on page 755 and discusses 3 different issues, or it's kind of a miscellaneous chapter because they describe how you can use email in an ASP.NET application, how you can create your own custom error pages in an ASP.NET application, and what to do if the user is constantly bopping back and forth, hitting their back button, and things that can happen that probably you don't want to have happen in your application. So we'll be back to look at that in just a couple moments.